welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie. I am the head of publication here, and I'm thrilled today to introduce a discussion around the brands currently leading the CCaaS space. And joining me for that conversation is Zeus Kerravala, the principal analyst at ZK Research. Zeus, thanks very much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good morning, Charlie. How are you? I'm doing quite well. You know, it's almost summertime here. Time for a little vacation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite grey here, though where I am. But apart from that, I'm doing well, thanks. And this actually conversation leads on from another conversation we had at the start of the year where we dissected sort of 10 prominent CCaaS vendors. But I do want to take a closer look at, maybe a broader look at this topic overall. And let's maybe first start with how a contact center could spot the best placed CCaaS vendor for them. I don't know if you have any advice here.
Yeah, well, that's really going to depend on the organization itself. So I can't actually sit here and say there's one best vendor for every company. And so I think organizations need to look at their requirements. You know, for instance, if you have a big on-prem base of a certain vendor, you might want to migrate to that vendor in the cloud. If you have, a lot of, say, text-based messages versus calling, if you're a gaming company, something like that, or a company that supports developers, it's not likely you're getting a lot of calls. So make sure they've got the right messaging platforms for you, but a lot of them will be unique. I will say the choice of the right CCaaS vendor is incredibly important here because, one of my interesting points from my data is that 2/3 of customers now admit that they'll change loyalties from a brand and based on one bad interaction, right? So you don't get a lot of second chances here, right? And customer experience is the top brand differentiator. And so making the right decision is important, but I think the decision you choose really is based upon your criteria. So I'm not trying to buck the question. I'm just saying there's not a universal best, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think that's maybe what I would add to that. Obviously, as you mentioned, you've got to consider your broader ecosystem on which CCaaS solution fits.
Yeah, even which partners that all these companies partner with different vendors, and so if there's a certain CRM vendor that's maybe only supported by a couple, you should choose that one and things. And so it really is an ecosystem decision. A lot of it's based on what you have and where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for me also, just to add again, is like referenceability. It is key from my perspective as well. Making sure that you don't just take reviews on G2 or Gartner Peer Insights or whatever, but actually working with your vendors so they network you with similar customers in similar industries who have similar requirements, and you can speak to them directly, hear their warts and all stories. I think that's something that often overlooked. We often talk about the features and the capabilities, but I think that's super important too. But kind of given that there's no right vendor for, as you said, it depends on what company you are for the best placed vendor. There are particular CCaaS providers that are doing better than others, and those that are leading the way in this space. I don't know if there are any that spring first to mind for you.
Yeah, and so this when you just look at the diversity of vendors in the CCaaS space, it underscores what we just talked about. I think if you are looking for just a CCaaS pure play, and that is you want to service your contact center, you want to move everything 100% to the cloud. A company like NICE, it's hard to find one that does it better. They build all their own tools, so they have their own workforce management, engagement management, quality management, and they're really a one-stop shop for everything, right? If you're looking for a company, perhaps you do a lot of back office, front office interactions, a company like Cisco would be great because they've got a long history in UC, and they've also got a long history in contact center, and they've done a good job bringing those worlds together. I think also if you think about if you're a large enterprise, you're globally distributed, I've always said nobody does big better than Cisco, right? So if you think about those requirements, that's where I'd look at the WebEx contact center suite. Another vendor that's really interesting to me is AWS. I think with the Connect product, the Amazon Connect product, they've gone to this unique billing model. So if you're a seasonal organization, like a retailer, and you have half your calls perhaps are between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? You're going to see these big spikes in volumes. If you're an accounting firm, a lot of your calls will be around tax time and things like that. So their pay-as-you-go model is very effective. And also if you want to take a developer approach as well, that's very effective. And then if you're a small business and you're looking to bring UCCC together, a company like 8x8 or Ring Central Services, those types of customers very well as well. So just, when you go through those, you can understand that those are all those vendors are very good in their own right. They all service their own, have kind of their unique go-to-market, and choosing the right vendor there, it becomes important because you can get exactly what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned Cisco as well, because I've recently covered the Gartner's Voice of the Customer report for CCaaS, and whereas before, I'll say it's now a leader, just one of two leaders within that report. So, customer's choice, I think, is the phrase that they use alongside Genesis, which is another pure play similar to NICE, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating to see their evolution in the contact center, as you mentioned, with the single unified platform as well, and add the Cisco devices on top of that as well, and the built-in security and the ability for flexible deployments with their on-premise and cloud software too.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting trend to watch, Charlie, is the how on-prem. If you look at the narrative coming out of companies like AWS and NVIDIA, IBM, they'll all tell you from a general computing perspective, we're seeing more hybrid, right? And a lot of that is with the global macro. Now, I've always said communications tends to lag general computing by a good 3 to 4 years. And part of that is the criticality of the systems, right? Nobody wants to mess with your contact center, because there's a lot of ramifications. And so I do believe this industry is going to shift hybrid over time. And that's an area where Cisco, of course, has their strength because they've got a long history in on-prem, and they've done a good job of making sure that the on-prem and cloud pieces work together to be able to deliver something hybrid. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's a great vendor mix that you've also put out there too. It does make me think, though, and maybe this is an interesting question to ask. I don't know if there's any potential vendors that are perhaps falling behind as well that you notice that brands particularly aren't looking at as maybe they should be.
Yeah, the two vendors that come to mind really are Microsoft and Google. These are two of the biggest vendors out there, right? There's really nothing they couldn't go acquire if they wanted to. They've danced around the topic of contact center for a long time, but they haven't really ever come to market with anything concrete. Google had their partnership with UJet. I've heard rumors that they're building their own, so who knows what's going on with that. Microsoft's got all the tools to do it, but it's another one. In fact, Microsoft's go-to-market approach of being good enough, right, and trying to bundle some things in with licenses, I don't know if that works in the contact center. Again, it's a very critical application, so you can't throw spaghetti at a wall and then let your users tell you what's wrong. So if I were to look at two companies that I think have fallen behind and may completely kind of whiff on this shift, this CX-driven environment we're in, it's Google and Microsoft.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've spoken about Google before. The product itself seems quite good. It's just the packaging with the Google Customer Engagement Suite and that whole thing. It can be quite complex to understand, and I think maybe there's a better marketing job. It can be.
Well, they've never done enterprise very well either, right? Like they don't. When you look at their other products, Google Docs and things like that, they tend to be half in, half out. And again, I think from that works okay if you're selling Gmail, things like that. But when you talk about contact center, you need to be all in on these.
Yeah, and it will be interesting, as you said, to see if Microsoft does really kind of just let go and go all in, because it should be a big player in this space theoretically. So that would be fascinating to watch. Zeus, we've covered a lot of ground there already, and so I think maybe that's a great place to end today's chat. But thanks very much for joining me today.
No, thank you, Charlie. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. And also thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.